Usually, when you look at a travel brochure for a tropical island in the South Pacific, there's like a very specific visual vocabulary.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely. It's almost a cliche at this point.
Yeah, exactly. You picture the pristine white sand beaches, the crystal clear azure water, maybe, I don't know, a sea turtle lazily swimming by a coral reef. It's this image of pure, untouched nature.
Right. It's the ultimate archetype of an eco-sanctuary.
Right. And if you were to draw like a minimalist infographic of this for our listener, it would just be a simple green palm tree silhouette against a blue ocean. Simple, clean, comforting.
That visual is so deeply ingrained in us that, well, we rarely question whether there's an entirely different reality operating just out of frame.
I mean, you flip that idyllic postcard over, and you'd expect a handwritten note about the ocean breeze. But what if instead of a note, you found a ledger?
A very complex, very contradictory ledger.
Right. And what if the numbers on that ledger forced you to draw a massive black, coal-burning industrial smokestack right next to that green palm tree?
With a giant equal sign right between them.
Yes. Suddenly, that pristine image just completely shatters. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to this deep dive, where we are essentially tearing up the postcard.
It's definitely a paradigm shift for anyone who assumes genography dictates an economy.
Totally. We're looking at a massive stack of source material today. Decades of historical macroeconomic ledgers, demographic shifts, environmental footprints, all focused on one highly revealing location.
New Caledonia, a French territory located right out in the South Pacific.
Yeah, New Caledonia. And we are doing this because there's one single staggering number that just jumped out of the research and totally grabbed us by the collar.
You're talking about the carbon footprint.
I am talking about the carbon footprint. When you imagine that wealthy Pacific island, you imagine eco-friendly living.
Yeah.
But the reality is New Caledonia has a per capita carbon footprint of 14.1 tons.
Yeah, 14.1 tons. And to ground that number in reality for you listening, that is astronomical.
Like, how bad is it compared to everywhere else?
It easily eclipses the per capita emissions of many massive, heavy industry superpowers around the globe. It's vastly higher than the global average.
Wow.
You are looking at a population that is, per capita, emitting carbon at a rate that basically rivals some of the most hyper-industrialized zones on the entire planet.
Which just makes zero intuitive sense for a remote tropical island.
Yeah.
I mean, how does a place like that become a heavy-hitting carbon emitter?
To the ultimate paradox.
Exactly. So today's mission is to unpack this high-carbon paradise. We're going to break down the structural pain points, the glaring economic contradictions, and, the hidden mechanics of a society that is literally trapped between its environment and its bank account.
And to understand the scale of that pollution, we actually have to start at the complete other end of the equation.
Right, the money.
Exactly. You have to look at the sheer scale of the wealth. The money flowing through this island is the engine driving everything else.
So if we look at the data, and there's this great line chart in the sources showing the trajectory of their GDP per capita, it tells a pretty dramatic story, right?
Oh, it's a story of extreme wealth accumulation. Historically, if you go back to its earlier days, New Caledonia's GDP per capita was modest. It hovered around a few $1,000s.
Which is what you'd expect,
Yeah.
right? Fairly typical for an isolated island economy that, mostly relies on local trade and subsistence.
Right. But then it embarked on this massive, almost vertical upward trajectory. I mean, it soared to a peak of over $33,500 per person.
Wait, over $33,500?
Yes. There's literally a giant red dot on our data chart marking that exact peak. In more recent years, it has stabilized a bit, but it remains heavily entrenched in a very high bracket, fluctuating between $29,000 and $35,000.
Let's just pause on that for a second because, GDP per capita can sometimes be a really tricky metric.
It can hide a lot of inequality, yeah.
Exactly. Is this a situation where you have, like, 3 billionaires living on a hill in massive mansions, completely skewing the average for a population of impoverished fishermen? Or is this actual systemic wealth?
It is entirely systemic. This rapid and sustained growth officially classifies New Caledonia as a high-income economy by standard global metrics.
Okay, so it's the real deal.
Yeah, the wealth permeates the infrastructure. This isn't just a comfortable island. This is one of the absolute wealthiest island economies on the planet.
It's like finding out the sleepy tropical resort town you visit for a weekend getaway is actually pulling in Wall Street level per capita income.
That's a great way to put it.
But let's look at the actual mechanics of that. If I inject a $33,000 plus average income into a relatively small, geographically isolated population, what does that actually do to the society?
Well, it radically transforms their relationship with the rest of the world. A GDP per capita in the mid-30,000s translates to a population with massive purchasing power.
So they aren't like trading coconuts.
Far from it. They are demanding global consumer goods. We're talking late-model cars, high-end electronics, modern healthcare facilities, massive climate-controlled office buildings.
So they're participating in the global market as heavy, modernized consumers.
Exactly, which requires a completely different type of daily life.
Right. If there is that much money flowing, what is everyone actually doing all day to earn it? I mean, if you were to walk down the street in the capital city of Noumea today, who are you bumping into?
You are bumping into a workforce that has undergone a profound structural mutation. Let's look at the employment data.
The stacked area chart, right.
Yeah.
The one with the gray gradients?
Yeah, that one. If you look at it, agriculture as a viable career has practically vanished.
Vanish, like completely.
Historically, farming employed over 7% of the workforce. Today, it has plummeted to less than 2%.
Less than 2%. So, for all intents and purposes, nobody is farming.
Pretty much nobody.
Nobody is producing food locally on any meaningful macro scale. So what is the actual job market?
While the farms emptied out, the office buildings filled up. The service sector completely took over the island. Today, a massive 75 to 77% of the population is employed in services.
Wow, 77%.
Yeah, we are talking about retail workers, government administrators, healthcare professionals, teachers, tourism guides, finance managers. And meanwhile, the industrial sector has hovered stubbornly in the 21 to 25% range for years.
I'm trying to visualize this. You have 3/4 of the population sitting at desks, working in hotels, or managing retail shops. Almost no one is growing food.
Right.
That brings up a massive logistical vulnerability, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean, for you listening, imagine living on an island in the middle of the ocean, and almost 80% of you are sending emails or selling clothes. What do you eat?
You eat whatever arrives on a cargo ship.
Oh, wow.
Because the domestic workforce has entirely shifted to services, the island must import almost everything required for daily survival. The National Ledger confirms this extreme openness.
Let's talk about that ledger because the trade numbers are kind of wild.
They really are. Their merchandise trade numbers fluctuate massively, representing anywhere between 40% and an astonishing 117% of total GDP.
Wait. 117% of GDP tied up in trade?
Yeah.
How can trade be more than 100% of your gross domestic product? That sounds, mathematically, how does that work?
It sounds impossible, but it happens because GDP measures the value added within the borders.
Okay.
So if an economy is importing massive quantities of expensive finished goods like cars, heavy machinery, food, fuel, and simultaneously exporting highly valuable raw materials, the total volume of that cross-border trade can actually exceed the total internal economic output.
I get it. It signifies a hyper-open economy.
Exactly.
But that sounds incredibly fragile. It means the internal market is too small to sustain the population's high-income lifestyle, so they are entirely tethered to external supply chains.
Utterly tethered.
They're importing their food, their vehicles, their building materials, everything.
It is the very definition of vulnerability. If global shipping networks experience a shock, say a pandemic, a fuel crisis, or a geopolitical conflict, New Caledonia feels it immediately. They don't have a domestic buffer to fall back on.
Okay, but this brings us to a glaring contradiction.
Which is?
We started this deep dive talking about a massive 14.1-ton carbon footprint.
Right.
I'm looking at this employment reality, and it just doesn't add up. If almost 80% of the people on this island are working in offices or shops, and they import all their finished goods from overseas, where's the carbon coming from?
The million-dollar question.
Right. Service sector jobs don't produce 14 tons of CO2 per person.
Yeah.
A bank teller or a hotel receptionist doesn't have an industrial carbon footprint.
No, they don't.
So what is that remaining 21% of the industrial sector actually doing?
You're hitting on the core tension of the island, and to answer that, we have to look at how they actually pay for all those imported goods.
Okay, lay it on me.
The answer lies in a very specific, highly volatile line item on the ledger: mineral rents.
Mineral rents.
Yes. New Caledonia sits on some of the largest world-class reserves of nickel on the entire planet.
Nickel, like the metal we need for stainless steel.
Yes, stainless steel, modern infrastructure, and increasingly for electric vehicle batteries. It's incredibly valuable.
Okay, so they mine nickel.
They mine a lot of nickel.
Okay.
When you look at their national data, mineral rents, which here means the direct economic return from extracting nickel, make up an utterly foundational yet terrifyingly unpredictable portion of their economy.
How unpredictable are we talking?
Well, in a bad year, it might account for just 1% or 3% of the GDP.
Okay, that's pretty low.
But during boom years,
Yep.
it has surged up to represent 26.3% of the entire economy.
Wait, over a quarter of the entire economic output of the island comes from pulling a single metal out of the ground.
Yes. The data shows these massive black bars representing the high-yield years, just totally dominating the chart. And this introduces a classic, devastating macroeconomic phenomenon.
I think I know where you're going with this.
The resource curse, or more specifically, the mechanics of Dutch disease.
Let's unpack Dutch disease for a second, because I think it perfectly explains why nobody is farming anymore.
It really does.
If I understand the mechanism correctly, it's not just that mining is profitable, right? It's that mining is so profitable, it actively destroys other industries. Is that right?
That is the precise mechanism. Imagine you're a local farmer in New Caledonia trying to hire workers to harvest crops.
Okay.
But a mile down the road, a massive international mining conglomerate is hiring truck drivers and offering salaries subsidized by booming global nickel prices.
The farmer can't compete with those wages.
Not even close. The local labor gets completely sucked into the high-paying mining sector or into the massive service sector that the mining wealth funds.
And on top of that, the massive influx of foreign cash from selling nickel drives up the local cost of living, right?
Yeah.
And it strengthens the local currency. So suddenly, it becomes cheaper to just import carrots and beef from Australia or France than to pay the hyperinflated local wages to grow them at home. The wealth from the ground literally makes the soil uncompetitive.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. The wealth kills the soil. That 75% service sector, the comfortable government jobs, the retail shops, the high salaries, it's ultimately funded directly or indirectly by the wealth generated from nickel.
It's an ecosystem entirely dependent on a single apex predator.
The global price of nickel.
It's like having your entire household income tied to a single wildly volatile tech stock.
Yeah, exactly.
You feel incredibly rich on a Tuesday when the market is up. You're buying imported cars, you're expanding the government payroll. But when the market drops on Thursday, you're facing existential ruin.
Because you don't know how to do anything else. You don't have a diversified manufacturing base or an agricultural sector to fall back on.
It is a high-wire act with a very thin safety net. But, and here's where I'm still confused, while the wealth comes from the nickel, where does the 14.1 tons of carbon come from? Digging rocks out of the ground doesn't give you 14 tons of carbon per capita. An excavator scooping dirt just isn't that carbon intensive.
No, it's not. But they aren't just shipping raw dirt. They are smelting it.
Smelting it.
Yeah, they are processing the raw ore into ferronickel to radically increase its export value. And the thermodynamics of nickel smelting are just brutal.
What does that mean, practically?
It means it requires massive, sustained, ultra-high heat furnaces operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And to feed those industrial furnaces on an isolated island, what are they burning?
Fossil fuels.
Ah.
The energy ledger is shocking. If you look at the circular infographic in the data, it shows that fossil fuel consumption accounts for a staggering 91.5% of total energy use on the island.
91.5%, that is.
Wow, it's massive.
So over 9/10 of everything powering this island, the massive industrial smelters, the shipping ports, the air conditioning in all those service sector offices, the imported cars, it's all running on imported oil or coal.
Almost all of it. And that is the direct mechanism behind the carbon villain statistic.
The 14.1 tons.
Yes. The human-made CO2 emissions, excluding land use change, just the pure industrial and domestic emissions, have moved in lockstep with their economic development. Decades ago, it was around 6.5 tons per capita.
Still high, but not crazy.
Right. But today, it has skyrocketed, literally doubled to that 14.1 tons.
So if we step back for you listening and look at the physical reality here, you have a high-energy smelting industry combined with a near-total dependency on imported fossil fuels.
But it's the ultimate carbon trap.
They traded ecological sustainability for immediate wealth. They need the nickel revenue to maintain their $33,000 per capita lifestyle to pay for all their imported food. But processing that nickel is making them one of the worst per capita polluters on Earth.
It is the quintessential high-income trap. They are caught in a loop.
But surely, with all that wealth, they recognize the problem, right? I mean, are they using the nickel money to transition the grid? Does the physical infrastructure show massive solar farms or wind turbines being built to power these smelters?
Well, they are trying, but the mechanical reality of the grid makes it incredibly difficult, and the data shows the pace is agonizingly slow.
How slow?
If you look at the trajectory of non-hydro renewable energy, things like solar and wind, it's a very shallow step chart. It has crawled from practically zero, about 0.5%, up to just around 7% in recent years.
7%.
Yeah.
That is basically a rounding error compared to the 91.5% fossil fuel monster. Why is it so hard to just build solar panels on a sunny tropical island?
It's not about the panels. It's about the nature of the industrial demand. A massive nickel smelter cannot run on intermittent power.
Meaning what? If the wind stops blowing, the furnace turns off.
Exactly. And if a cloud passes over a solar farm and the voltage drops, a high-heat industrial furnace can be severely permanently damaged.
Oh, wow.
They require massive, uninterrupted baseload power. To run a smelter on solar or wind, you don't just need the panels. You need a colossal, staggeringly expensive grid-scale battery infrastructure to ensure the heat literally never drops.
So the transition isn't just about putting panels on residential roofs. It's about re-engineering an entire massive industrial energy system from the ground up.
Precisely. And the growth of that 7% renewable capacity is simply being outpaced by the sheer unyielding volume of coal and oil required to keep the economic engine running at full capacity today.
It feels like they're stuck on a treadmill.
Yeah.
They have to keep running the dirty smelters to pay for the expensive food imports, leaving very little capital or time to completely overhaul their energy grid.
And time is the operative word here, because their window to pivot this economy is rapidly closing.
Wait, closing? Why?
The pressure isn't just coming from the environmental impact or the volatility of global nickel prices. There is a ticking clock hidden deep within the socio-political fabric of the island.
You're talking about the demographics.
I am. Let's look at the population spreadsheets. If they have to completely rebuild their energy grid and transition away from a dirty mining economy, who is actually going to do that work?
Right, you need human capital. So what did the demographics look like?
They are facing a severe demographic headwind. It's something demographers refer to as a scissors difference.
A scissors difference.
Yeah, if you visualize an age graph, you have two lines moving in opposite dangerous directions, and they cross each other like a pair of scissors.
Okay, paint that picture for me.
On one hand, the aging population is growing rapidly. The 65 and older demographic has climbed steadily from just 3.4% of the population up to 11.4%.
Which, on the surface, is a success story, right? I mean, people are living longer, which correlates directly with that $33,000 GDP, better healthcare, better living standards, higher life expectancy.
True. It is a hallmark of modernization. But concurrently, the other blade of the scissors is falling sharply.
The younger generation.
Exactly. The youth population, those aged 0 to 14, has plummeted. It used to be over 40% of the population, a very young, vibrant base. Now it has dropped to roughly 21%.
That is a massive contraction in young people.
It is. Furthermore, the overall population growth engine has completely stalled. Historically, the island was growing at a robust 3.35% annually. Today, it is barely scraping by at under 0.95% annual growth.
Under 1%. That's stagnation.
Absolute stagnation.
I want to translate these demographic lines into economic reality for the listener, because this is where the theory of the demographic dividend comes in, right?
Yes, exactly.
So the demographic dividend is essentially a window of time where a country has a massive bulge of working-age adults and relatively few dependent children or retirees to take care of.
Right.
It's like a household budget where you have 3 adults working full-time and no kids or elderly parents to support. You have massive disposable income and energy to build things.
That is a perfect way to explain the mechanism. And New Caledonia's data shows that this dividend, this specific window of maximum productivity, is officially over.
The inflection point has been passed.
Yes, the lines have crossed. As the 65-plus cohort grows and the 0 to 14 cohort shrinks, the future labor pool is just evaporating.
And why is that fatal for their specific economic structure? I mean, lots of countries are aging.
True, but remember that 75% service-based economy we talked about?
Yeah, all the retail and government jobs.
A service economy requires 2 things to survive: constant internal consumption and a constant influx of labor. A stagnant, rapidly aging population means the internal consumer market is permanently capped.
Because retirees buy different things.
Exactly. They spend less on new cars, less on retail, and more on healthcare. You cannot endlessly grow a service and retail sector if your population isn't growing and forming new households.
Plus, who pays for the pensions? Who pays for the health care of that growing 11.4%?
The shrinking youth base.
Right. If the youth base is shrinking, the tax burden on the remaining workers becomes crushing. They are essentially racing against their own biology.
That's a grim but accurate way to look at it.
If they want to pivot away from dirty nickel mining, build a massive new green energy grid, and transition to a modern, diversified economy, they need a vibrant, adaptable, energetic workforce. But they are trying to fundamentally renovate their economic house just as the construction crew is filing for retirement.
Exactly. The human capital required to engineer this transition is literally aging out of the workforce. They have a strictly limited window of time to use their current mining wealth to secure a sustainable future.
Before what happens?
Before the sheer fiscal burden of an aging population consumes all their resources.
Wow, we have painted a pretty bleak picture here. I mean, we've diagnosed an island that seems trapped in this complex, high-dimensional maze.
It's a tough spot, no doubt.
They've got volatile, single-commodity wealth, massive industrial pollution, an extinct agriculture sector, an extreme reliance on global shipping, and an aging workforce that is running out of time.
It sounds impossible to solve when you stack it all up like that.
So is there any structural advantage they have? Any hidden lifelines in this data reality?
There are. It's not all doom and gloom. If we look closely at the physical infrastructure and the ecological reality, there are two major silver linings that provide the exact foundation they need for a strategic pivot.
Okay, thank God. Let's explore the bright spots. What do they actually have going for them?
The first major advantage is their digital infrastructure.
Really? Their internet?
Yes. Despite being geographically isolated in the vastness of the Pacific, they are highly connected. The physical reality of undersea cables and localized networks means that internet usage has reached an impressive 82% of the population.
82% internet penetration. That's huge.
It is. And the rate of fixed broadband subscriptions shows significant sustained growth.
That is a massive strategic asset.
Hmm.
It means that while their physical logistics, the shipping containers of food and oil, are highly vulnerable, their digital logistics are incredibly robust.
Precisely. They are wired for the modern world. And the second major advantage is ecological.
Ecological?
Well,
Wait, which sounds completely contradictory given the 14.1 tons of carbon we just spent 20 minutes discussing.
it does sound like a paradox, but it is a vital nuance in the data. The severe pollution on the island is largely atmospheric CO2.
From the smelters.
Emitted from localized point sources, yes. Specifically, the industrial smelters and the fossil fuel power plants. But if you look at the macroecology, the actual physical land use, the total forest area has remained stubbornly, beautifully stable.
Wait, how is that physically possible? Usually, when an economy modernizes and GDP skyrockets to $33,000, you see massive deforestation for agriculture or sprawling suburban development just tearing up the jungle.
But think back to the mechanism of Dutch disease we discussed earlier.
Oh, agriculture vanished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Less than 2% of the workforce is farming. Because the mining wealth made it cheaper to import all their food, they never needed to clear-cut their forests to create massive industrial-scale farmlands.
That is wild.
For decades, the forest area has hovered tightly between roughly 8,300 and 8,390 square kilometers. They have essentially experienced zero net forest loss.
So the death of their agricultural sector inadvertently saved their jungle.
It did. It's a fascinating unintended consequence.
So the physical reality of the island is essentially a two-faced coin. On one side, you have a dirty 19th century style industrial mining hub spewing carbon into the atmosphere.
Yes.
But on the other side, you have highly connected 21st century population living right next to a pristine, untouched tropical jungle.
And those two elements, the digital connectivity and the intact ecology, are the literal keys to escaping the trap.
Okay, I see the path now.
Mm-hmm.
The intact forest isn't just a pretty view. It represents a massive, invaluable carbon sink.
Yes, and it is a world-class, untouched reserve for high-end ecotourism.
Right. If you want to transition that massive 75% service sector away from jobs that are merely circulating the wealth generated by dirty nickel mining, you need a new source of external revenue. Ecotourism is a perfect, low-carbon fit for an untouched tropical island.
And the 82% broadband penetration means they don't just have to rely on physical tourism either, which, still requires jet fuel and physical logistics.
They have the hardware required to leapfrog into a modern digital service economy,
Exactly. They could export software, remote administration, digital design, or financial services.
which allows them to export value over fiber optic cables, moving away from physically extracting rocks from the ground.
It completely changes the economic equation.
Okay, so let's bring all these complex mechanisms together into a summary. If we visualize a sort of four-quadrant logic matrix.
I love a good matrix.
Right. So in the strengths column, we have high GDP, over $30,000, and high digital coverage at 82%.
And in the weaknesses column, we have extreme fossil fuel dependency at over 90% and a rapidly aging population at 11.4%.
And the core pain point tying it all together is that they used a single volatile commodity nickel to buy high income, paying for it with massive carbon emissions. And now they face a closing window to fix it before demographic decline makes it impossible.
That is the perfect summary. So if you were a strategic planner looking at the society based on the structural realities we've outlined, what is the actual mechanical roadmap for survival? How do they decouple?
Well, you're the expert here. What does the data suggest?
Based on the data, policymakers have a very clear two-step strategic push they must execute before that demographic window closes.
Okay, step one,
Step one is energy substitution.
solving the 14.1-ton problem.
Yes. They have to aggressively leverage that tiny 7% momentum in non-hydro renewables. They possess the sovereign wealth from the nickel booms, right? They need to use that capital to invest in massive grid-scale solar, wind, and the necessary battery storage infrastructure.
So not just household solar.
No. The immediate existential goal must be to convert the industrial nickel smelting process to run entirely on green electricity.
Which instantly solves the carbon paradox. If you can use solar and batteries to maintain the heat in those smelters, the 14.1 tons of CO2 drops like a stone, but you get to keep the incredibly lucrative nickel revenue.
Exactly. It decouples the primary economic engine from fossil fuels.
But that is only step one.
Right, because while it solves the pollution, it doesn't solve the resource curse.
They would still be hyper-dependent on the volatile global price of nickel.
Yes. So step two is industrial diversification.
Getting away from the wild swings of the commodity market.
They must utilize their 82% internet penetration and their 8,300 square kilometers of pristine forests to fundamentally restructure their labor force.
Pivot away from mining.
They need to pivot from a service sector that just consumes imported goods paid for by mining toward a service sector that generates external revenue independently, sustainable ecotourism, and digital service exports.
By doing this, they dilute the risk of being completely reliant on one metal.
And crucially, they create high-value, modern jobs for that shrinking youth population.
This breakdown is so illuminating. Because, as you listen to this, you realize this isn't just a quirky, isolated story about one remote island in the Pacific.
Not at all.
It is a microcosm. It is a miniature, hyper-concentrated laboratory for literally any wealthy nation on Earth trying to figure out how to maintain its high standard of living without boiling the planet.
The tensions we see here, the struggle to replace high-density fossil fuels with renewables, the massive economic distortion caused by resource wealth, the crushing fiscal pressure of an aging population, these are the exact same macroeconomic forces playing out in major economies in Europe, North America, and Asia.
It is just easier to see the mechanisms at work in New Caledonia because it is a closed, isolated system. You can see all the inputs and outputs clearly.
Exactly. It's a perfect case study.
I really appreciate you helping to decode these mechanisms today. It is amazing how looking past the surface of a statistic can reveal such a dramatic, high-stakes reality of a society caught between extreme wealth, thermodynamics, and a hard place.
It's a vital reminder that behind every economic indicator is a physical reality. A supply chain, a power grid, an agent worker, and, a potential path forward. Knowledge is most valuable when we can see how those physical realities actually interact.
Totally agree. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We started by tearing up a beautiful postcard of a tropical paradise and finding a complex, carbon-heavy, highly vulnerable reality underneath.
A reality built on coal and nickel.
Right. The story of New Caledonia proves that reaching high-income status is not the finish line of human development. In fact, it is often just a temporary fragile high funded by pulling ancient things out of the ground and burning them.
Very true.
It begs a crucial question for you to think about as you go about your day. If true modernization requires us to completely sever the link between our economic survival and fossil fuels, How many of the world's richest, most advanced countries are actually just wealthy, but fundamentally failed modernizations?
That's a powerful question.
Are we all just New Caledonia operating on a slightly larger island? Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us.